Today's video is going to be different to usual. I'm going to tell you a short story, and it's a love story, only it's not a conventional love story. It's a love story with a slight soil related twist at the end, an ironic twist. Stay tuned. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to my channel, Simonsoil. If you like videos that show you how to maximise the sustainability, health and function of your soil so that you can grow better food, then do subscribe, and if you like this video, click like as well. So today's video is going to be in a different format. I've kind of decided to do it in this way because I don't really see anyone else doing it. I think it makes it more interesting, I think it makes it relatable, and I think the moral, if you like, of the story, there's an ironic twist at the end. The moral is presented in a far more fun, easy to remember way. So stay tuned for that. Now, before I begin, let me just say that I love making videos that help people grow better plants and crops. And that's really what I'm all about, showing people ways, teaching them things so that they can get the most out of their soil, so that they can grow the very best, healthiest, tastiest food possible. And that really is the purpose of this video, is to drive home certain points. There are lots of different ways to grow food, fruit, vegetables, and lots of different growing mediums that you can use to achieve that. And that's the very nature of this particular video. And if you've seen any of the other videos that I've done, you will know that I talk about harnessing the very best of what nature has to offer, maximizing it so that you can grow things in the healthiest way possible, the most natural way, or organic if that's your thing too. Basically producing food without having to use artificial chemicals or fertilizers. Now, I've told you that this is a unconventional love story and it has a ironic twist at the end. I'll elaborate a little bit more on that as we go. I think it will become clear once I get kind of started the direction it's going, but you might find it surprising. I still find it amazing that this was the conclusion from this whole kind of saga. So if you're sitting comfortably, I will begin. So once upon a time, there was a grower, and this grower was a large commercial grower. We'll call him Mario. I'm going to change the names in this because actually there's some commercial sensitivities to it. But his name was Mario. He was a huge grower based in the Netherlands, and he had hectares and hectares of glass, and he was concerned with growing vegetables and fruits. Tomatoes and cucumbers will probably be the things I'll reference in this. The very fact that he's commercial is still completely relevant, even if you're growing food at your home or an allotment, or you have a homestead where you're kind of producing even more. The fact that he's got acres and acres of glass is irrelevant. So my friend, whom we will call Luigi, introduced me to Mario, and this was early days. I had just set up my laboratory where we do soil microbiology testing, and my friend Luigi was consulting with Mario, and he, similar to me, worked on the basis of using microbiological principles to get the most out of crops. And so it began. Luigi introduced me to Mario so that we could do some soil testing for him. Only the difference with Mario is he wasn't actually growing in soil. Some years back, the rules and legislation had changed, which meant that they were no longer allowed to sterilize the soil with the highly toxic, nasty chemicals that they were. I think it was methyl bromide at the time, and steam sterilization just was not effective. And so to counter this, Mario had taken all of his production out of the soil and placed all of his plants into an inert grow media. And the reason he did this was because going into inert grow media, it is hygienic. It is devoid of all the pathogens and harmful organisms and toxic elements that inherently occur whenever you are growing a monocrop in an intensive environment. Quite often, when you're growing lots and lots and lots of the same thing very, very tightly together, you have a very stressful environment, and it's much easier for pathogens, for diseases to kind of get in there and mess things up. So Mario, this grower, had taken all of his production out of the soil and put them into these grow bags which contained a material called stone wool. Now, stone wool, for those who don't know, is precisely that. It is a wool made out of stone, and in fact they take certain rocks, they heat them up to incredibly high temperatures, so they're almost liquid state, they're kind of molten, and they spin them in a centrifuge, and you end up with a wool-like consistency. It's a little bit like what they do with candy floss. You end up with this fluffy material which is fantastic for supporting plant roots and holding a certain amount of water, but it's completely absent of harmful organisms. So one of the downsides of growing things in an inert grow media like stone wool or rock wool is that you need to give the plant everything it needs, and that means all the foods, all the waters. You need to continuously flood through, or not continuously but periodically flood through all the nutrients that the plant needs, and the water as well, and tightly control it. And these large commercial growers have incredibly complex but really efficient systems that can actually recycle all of that kind of nutrient solution and capture those nutrients that have leached through or seeped through and recycle them and give them back to the plant. So they're incredibly efficient and can be quite economic. And this grower had been doing this for a number of years, but like most commercial growers, he's feeling the pressures of economics and actually just wanted to do things better and to produce better quality tomatoes and cucumbers. And ultimately, this is where my friend came into the equation by applying isolated groups of microorganisms, introducing them into that kind of circular feeding system where the water's flushed through. Over time, we were able to demonstrate through testing in the laboratory that we were increasing the amount of beneficial microbes in the stone wool. Well, actually, initially we were introducing them, but then we were increasing them. And over a number of years, we were able to tally that up with improvements in the crop performance. By improvements, I don't necessarily mean increasing the yield, so he wasn't producing tons more of tomatoes, but what he was doing was producing a higher percentage at a better grade, so the highest grade he could for market, and reducing the amount at the lower grade. So overall, he was actually producing far more useful tomatoes than he had previously. And I think they even did some bricks testing as well, which looked at the nutrient density and determined that these tomatoes not only tasted better, but they were more dense in terms of all the beneficial nutrients and micronutrients that someone might need. So they were tastier, they were healthier, and he was producing more of a better grade as well. As a consequence, through introducing biology into the root area, which I've talked about in other videos, the root zone, the rhizosphere, he was actually starting to not only save money because he needed to use even less fertilizers, but he was actually making more money on the end product. So the financial benefit for him was huge. But I told you at the start that this was a story about soil, and this is kind of where it gets really interesting and relevant for everyone who's growing their own food. Now, this grower really recognized the benefits of introducing, maintaining or growing the different microbes in the rhizosphere for his tomato plants in particular, and he wanted to do even more. And so we supported my friend in his consulting, and the next big step that they took was to begin inoculating. So that means kind of adding a really good quality compost on top of the rock wool when the young tomato plants were placed in it. And once they did that, the results that they got were phenomenal. Suddenly they'd gone from kind of here, which we were pretty blown away by, up to sort of this level. And it was even better and generating an even better return. At this time, they also recognized another huge benefit, and it didn't just relate to the output, the tomatoes that they were harvesting at the other end of this. It related to the manner in which they were growing. And what they found was, by adding all these microbes and by further adding compost, which kind of aged or matured, if you like, that rhizosphere much quicker, they were able to reuse these rock wool blocks that they were using 3 times in a row before flipping it over and using it again for another 3 seasons. So they could use it 6 times. And previously they'd been throwing out these blocks every single year because they were so paranoid about having the most hygienic environment possible. And the money they saved on doing this was huge. And that relates to one of the second principles of using soil microbiology, which is disease suppression. By adding loads of beneficial microorganisms to a particular environment, you can outcompete the pathogenic organisms that might exist. You're preloading things, and the harmful organisms just have no chance. But still, I told you this was a love story, and this is almost the point where I kind of reveal. So grower, my friend, we're doing this for a number of years, and it was working fantastically well. The results they were getting were amazing. They were saving money. They were producing better tomatoes than they'd ever produced before. We were backing it up with reports from the laboratory which showed not just incremental increases in terms of soil life, but actually quite marked steps, and they were able to correlate that directly to what they were doing on the nursery. But by this point, the grower, Mario, had really bought into the whole principles of doing things as naturally as possible, and my friend had been telling him for a number of years, you know, the direction this was going. And so the conclusion that they came to after all of this, the thing they needed to do to take it to the maximum they possibly could, and they committed to it, was to not add compost to the rock wool blocks anymore, but actually take the plants and to start growing them in the soil again. Now, I absolutely love this twist. You've gone from a situation where large commercial growers have come out of the soil because of the lack of control it has given them, the lack of control over hygiene, the threat of disease, and the control that growing in a man-made material outside of soil gives them, the complete control over all aspects of growing something, the watering, the feeding, even the micromanagement, the microbiological management. And you end up in this position where the penny kind of drops. This is great doing it like that, and it does give control, but actually plants will grow much better if they are in the soil. Now, in order to do that, the soil needs to be as healthy as possible. And this is where many of the other principles I talk about on my channel kind of come into play. This is what my friend who was giving him advice was guiding him on, building up a sustainable, healthy soil that was enriched with all the organic matter and materials it required to support a healthy, active, diverse biomass, a mixture of bacteria, fungi and other organisms that would work in unison with the plant. And that is the love story. What I'm talking about, and I said this wasn't like a conventional love story, is that bond, that love affair between the plant roots and the microbes. It was evident on this nursery this commercial grower was running, even when not growing in soil, when growing in stone wool, that bond between the organisms which were being added directly around the plant roots and how the plants responded, what they delivered as a consequence, compared to how I say to people, grow things in soil, you know, maximize the diversity and activity of the organisms as much as you can, and those organisms in the soil will work much more efficiently in a far more synergistic manner to really get the most out of your plant. And I really do look at that as a kind of love affair. If you look after your plant, the plant will look after the microbes. If you look after the microbes in the soil, they will help take care of your plant. It's this kind of healthy tension or love affair between plant and soil organisms. So if you have a healthy, loving relationship between your plants and soil microorganisms, you really can have your fairy tale ending. So there we go, everybody. That's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it and found it a little bit entertaining, and hopefully it kind of summed up the point nicely for you. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Maybe consider subscribing to the channel, or reach out and get in touch with me if you've got questions. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Take care.